All right, we are live with Will Harling. Hello, everybody. This is Kerry, Outreach Director for Trees Foundation, and you are in the Tree Lounge or watching on YouTube, our Trees Foundation YouTube channel. And I just want to welcome everyone, and I want to welcome everyone also who's watching the replay. And we've got a nice jade plant there, a nice tree.
Almost like a tree.
Yeah, I've been looking for the perfect tree lounge background. We have a banner up in the Facebook group. Haven't quite found the right background yet. So if anybody wants to make a nice suggestion, we're going to keep doing these tree lounge live interviews because I'm having a lot of fun doing them. And I'm getting to connect with our community of environmentalists working to restore the integrity and of the ecology of our beloved Redwood region of Northern California. And we have a lot of challenges, and we have a lot of amazing people working on those challenges, like this person with me right now, Will Harling. He is the co-founder of MidKlamath Watershed Council, and he's the co-lead of Western Klamath Restoration Partnership. And this year, to celebrate Trees Foundation's 30th anniversary, we decided we need to give out some recognition to people here and really celebrate the people that are doing amazing work and important work. And so we are awarding Will with the Tree of Life Award for Fire Resilience. And when we can gather again this spring, Will, we're going to have you and be able to give you that beautiful award in person and be able to celebrate and maybe even dance on the dance floor. So we're looking forward to that.
Wow, dancing on a dance floor. How long has it been?
Oh my God. Yeah. I've started to go to Zumba classes again. So I get to dance at Zumba. Thank goodness. Because I think I'd go crazy otherwise.
Yeah.
I want to start this broadcast with a land acknowledgement that here in Southern Humboldt, at my office, at the Trees Foundation office based in Garberville, we are on Wailaki land, unceded Wailaki territory. And so I just want to send out love and respect to all the Wailaki members in my community, and also to all the Wailaki that are living in Round Valley, in Covelo, in Mendocino County. You are an important part of our community, and Trees Foundation is committed to highlighting and honoring your history and your culture, because I think that's a really important work for everyone who cares about the earth, to care about the true history of the land that we live on, and to honor that and respect that and help to heal that history as well. And with that, we've got a lot of amazing topics to cover today, Will. And we can go ahead. I think you wanted to note where you are as well. And maybe we can talk about your first thing on the list here. You've been working on bringing cultural fire and prescribed fire back to the landscape for many years now, and it's really gotten a lot of attention, and you're making progress. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, thank you, Kerry. And I just want to say, right now I'm down here in Alameda with my kids who live down here during the school year. On Ohlone land, and I was just reading in the history of Alameda that the old Navy base that's just north of me here is actually built on burial grounds of the Ohlone people, and so it just kind of made me realize this history is everywhere. This dispossession is everywhere. I grew up on the Salmon River, Karuk and Konamihu land, and the fire knowledge that I have learned is a gift from the Karuk and the Konamihu people who have stewarded that landscape for forever, since time immemorial, with fire. And so I'm a huge proponent of cultural burning. I'm a non-native person. And so I think it's really important for us to acknowledge, where that knowledge is coming from, and to support those tribal communities across California who are, fighting for their right to manage their landscapes and fulfill their responsibility to their landscapes through managing fire, and it's still currently illegal in the state of California. And that's where, some of this new legislation, SB 332 Woods bill, that limits the liability of people who are burning within prescription. It limits the recovery of costs from fire response from organizations like CAL FIRE who respond to it as a wildfire and put it out. There's so many hurdles to getting good fire on the ground. A lot of our work has been to just, start to methodically look at those hurdles and ask that question of state and federal regulators, of our communities. Is this what we really want to make people do? Because, the result is you're going to get your fire as a wildfire or a prescribed fire. And in Florida, which is a state nearly the size of California, they choose to get their fire as prescribed fire. And they have over 1 million acres of prescribed fire every year and less than 50,000 acres of wildfire. And in California, it's reversed. And so we can get to that point where we're putting good fire on the ground, prescribed fire, cultural fire, at a scale similar to wildfire. But we have to change the laws that tilt the scales towards that fire coming as wildfire in the middle of summer. And so that's, hopefully Governor Newsom decides to sign SB 332 as well as Friedman's Assembly Bill 642, which does a lot of things. It requires the director of CAL FIRE to appoint a cultural burning liaison to work with tribes to start to incorporate that tribal fire knowledge into how we're managing fire across the state. It requires that that the state create a prescribed fire training center. And this is someplace where we could use a lot of support from listeners here and across the state. There will likely be a prescribed fire training center that's located at McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento and will be managed by CAL FIRE and the Forest Service. But the reality on the ground is that those agencies are very good at putting out fires, but they're not as adept at putting good fire on the ground or cultural fire or prescribed fire. And so that's why it's so important that we have additional training centers that are located, especially in areas like the Klamath Mountains, where you have, 3 of the largest tribes, the Hupa, the Karuk, and the Yurok, who are reclaiming fire on their landscapes and have a lot to teach us about how to use fire as a tool.
So you are returning fire to the land in the Klamath. You've made progress there. I was mentioning to a friend the other day that Florida is years ahead of California when it comes to prescribed fire, and they were quite shocked. You don't hear that very often about Florida, and yet it's perhaps because the suppression of fire was kind of stopped early on in Florida history, and that didn't happen as much in the Florida forestry culture like it did in California. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I have to give credit where it's due. Morgan Varner, who came to Humboldt State as a fire ecologist, he wanted to talk at the 2008 Klamath Fire Ecology Symposium when we were bringing it back. And I was like, but you're just going to talk about Florida. What can we learn from Florida? And I'll never forget his firebrand presentation at the symposium. He basically said, you Californians, you think you're so tough and independent. He's like, but when it comes to fire, you just roll over and give it up. And you're like, come save me. He's like, man, when the Forest Service came with the Dixie Crusaders down to Florida, we turned around and sent them packing. And that's why we own fire on our landscape today. In a follow-up conversation with the state forester over there, he's like, every day we put smoke in the air because, every day somebody is moving down from the Northeast expecting smoke-free skies. And we want them to know where they live. This is a land of fire.
living with fire. Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Getting used to
appreciate, that knowledge that, he passed on there, and it made me realize it's true. We're caught in this culture in California where we've given up our right to burn, and we're driven by the fear of the bad fire so much that we've disempowered the people that know how to apply the good fire. And so that really our work now is to shift back and have faith that if we empower those folks that know how to put good fire on the ground and to manage fire at the landscape scale, we're going to have much better outcomes at the end of the day.
So this legislation is on the governor's desk, SB 332, and hopefully he will sign it, and that will create some breaks and some barriers to prescribed fire. Correct? And then there's this AB 642. Is that the same legislation?
No, so AB 642 is Assembly Bill 642 from Friedman, and like I mentioned, it has many different parts. A couple were the cultural burning liaison, the prescribed fire training center, reducing the amount of times that we have these regional or even national burn suspensions that are in large part fear driven and politically motivated. The reality is that the chief of the Forest Service or the director of CAL FIRE, if they're supporting a prescribed fire, say in the wettest county in the state, Humboldt County, while homes are burning in Southern California, politically that doesn't look good. And so in order to keep their jobs at this point, they have to say no to us when it's the right time to burn in Humboldt County because of because of what it looks like to the press. And so that's really our work, to give them enough support and cover. And that goes for, the regional forester as well. Randy Moore just became the chief of the Forest Service, and now their replacement at the regional office is also enacting, regional burn suspensions that are statewide. And so AB 642, it's recommendations, it's not mandated, but it asks them to set those suspensions at the unit level or the forest level where it's going to be more reflective of the conditions on the ground in those places, and increase the amount of good fire we're getting on the ground.
Nice. Okay, great. And the $20 million prescribed fire claims fund, is that providing more cover for prescribed fire as well? So is that the Burn Boss program?
No, basically a lot of groups like ours, because of wildfire losses, not because we lost a prescribed fire, we had prescribed fire insurance for over 10 years, but with the heavy wildfire losses, many of the insurance companies who were providing that coverage backed out of the market. And so, now my board of directors doesn't have coverage if we're leading prescribed burns. And so, theoretically, the details still need to be figured out. But theoretically, this would be a backstop for groups like ours who employ burn bosses. In fact, Eric Dara, our burn boss, was hired literally a month before we lost our burn insurance. And so we're underutilizing the resources we have because, groups like ours, can't find. We've looked all over the country, looked under every stone, and just can't get insured for the practice of prescribed fire.
Okay. A lot of barriers, but hopefully this will create some shifts and allow for more. So thank you for all your work on that. And I know a lot of other people have been working on it as well. I see we have people watching our live broadcast, and please feel free to say hello in the comments and engage. If you ask a question in the comments, I can try to ask Will that question as well. And
yeah, I want to give a shout out to some of the folks that have been driving that legislation. As you know, Lenya Quinn Davidson has been a huge force of nature pushing these senators and assembly persons to do the right thing, and organizing a lot of grassroots effort throughout the state, to make what seemed impossible a year ago, be on the verge of reality. So shout out to Lenya.
Go
Shout
Lania.
out, yeah.
She's also on our board at Trees Foundation, and we're so grateful
really?
to have her. Yeah, you didn't know that?
I didn't.
Yeah. So, and Lania will also be on the panel with you and several other amazing fire resiliency activists and organizers on October 3rd. So I hope everyone comes to that event. That's going to be on Zoom, a Zoom webinar. And this is a warm up to it, right, Will?
Yeah.
There's a lot for us to all learn and understand about this process and this importance of fire to the California ecology. So that's a good segue to Trex. Is that what?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah, we're really excited this year. It was kind of fortuitous in a sense that, we've done prescribed fire training exchange events, both with the Klamath River and also with Margot Robbins and the Yurok, in partnership with the Nature Conservancy since 2014. And the way they're set up, there's usually a 1 to 2 week period that the dates are set in advance so people can come from around the country and participate, and sometimes internationally. And this year, actually it was last year when we kind of stole this model from New Mexico of the all hands, all lands burn team, which the idea was, we're tired of setting these dates and then the good burn window is the week after everybody goes home. And so the thought was you organize these interagency fire resources, tribes, NGOs, state and federal agencies, and then everybody's on standby until the window comes. And then you bring the people together to put fire on the ground at the right time. And so this year, we decided to combine those two models, and really, it was because we had over 170 applicants to this year's Trex. And we realized, with COVID, we can't throw 170 people in a room. It just isn't right at this point, but we can bring up, 70 to 80 folks every week and run a training for a week and focus those resources, especially when we have the good burn windows. So that's how we're setting up this year. We're starting ideally October 4th, and then going for 7 weeks. So it's 7 1-week trainings, get all the training stuff out of the way and paperwork, documentation on the Monday, burn for a few days, and then wrap up on a Friday with, presentations from folks like Bill Tripp and Kathy McCovey and Margot and some of those luminaries in the Native community that are keepers of that fire knowledge. We have 5 different tribal groups that are showing up. We have 7 volunteer fire departments, 5 federal agencies, 4 state agencies, 10 private companies, 19 different NGOs, a couple RCDs, 3 prescribed burn associations, and 8 universities. So it's an incredibly diverse group of folks that's showing up this year to burn. We've also got interest from Feinstein's office and Wood's office and Huffman's office to come up. So, it's a great opportunity for us to demonstrate, what can be accomplished when people come together around, learning together and burning together.
That sounds incredible and game changing in terms of the amount of knowledge that's going to be shared. Is there any way for those of us that aren't signed up, or will there be anything online that people can partake in? It sounds like it's too late to actually register for the in-person training, right? Yeah.
Yeah, unless you have a piece of fire equipment. We'll make exceptions for you if you're willing to bring an engine or, but we do have a visitor forum, and we have a great public information officer, Erica Terrence, who works with media and interested individuals, and so there are opportunities for people to come and observe, and I can share that with you, the link to that online forum, at the end of this or whatever, and get it out to folks.
That'd be great. Yeah, whatever you send me, I can put in the comments after the fact. So look for that in the comments, everyone. We do have a couple questions from someone watching. This is John from Petaluma. He says, our local legislator is running for insurance commissioner due to loss of insurance due to fire. Can the state start doing insurance for fire burns? Well, that's a good question. Can the state supply insurance? Is that something that's been talked about?
Yes, and it's not the state's first option, as you can imagine, and I think the Prescribed Fire Claims Fund is kind of the middle ground that we've reached right now. I do want to give a shout out to Nature Conservancy and all the work that they've been doing to forward this topic both in California and nationally. There's still a lot of work to do. I think ideally folks would like to see some sort of public-private hybrid, not just completely make a different system. But, the reality is it's in the state's best interest. It's the same way with, with healthcare workers, with medical, with police, with firefighters. You don't see a lot of insurance companies jumping up and down to take those because they're such high risk. And hopefully at some point our society and especially our lawmakers value the service that practitioners of fire provide, to be willing to cover that insurance. One way or another, we need to fix this problem, and we need to do it now.
Yeah. Great. And another question is, can we combine biochar burns with prescribed burns? Is that happening at all?
I'm a little opinionated about biochar, just in the sense that I think it takes a lot of energy to gather it all in one place and to burn it and to have that and then spread it around. I think people are doing great work, and I don't want to take down on that. But the reality is, the way I look at it is every time we do a burn out there on the landscape, all that burn material is left on the ground. And when the storms of winter come and transport that charcoal off the mountainside, it ends up in our floodplains. And that's what makes that thick soil that grows that 8-foot diameter fir tree that 400 years later falls across the stream and creates incredible stream habitat. And so I guess, it's like we're taking that wealth out of the forest and we're putting it into an agricultural setting, which is great on some sense. But I also feel like there's a lot less energy wasted in the transport and everything of that when we just restore the practice of fire. There's value to that biochar material on the forest floor.
On the ground. And I think this is one last related question. How much woody debris is allowed to remain on the ground after a cutting or a controlled burn?
Fire is very diverse, and I think that's part of the beauty of it. Any single unit is not going to be uniform, depending on the fuel loading, depending on when and how you light it, depending on the moisture of the fuels, you're going to get highly different levels. The way we deal with that in burn plans is we specify broad ranges of prescription, no more than 15% of the canopy is going to be taken out or replaced. We're ideal is to burn 30 to 70% of the ground fuels. You can put in prescriptions to put guideposts, but the reality is that fire is a very dynamic process, and that's why that term pyrodiversity was created, because the diversity of fire effects is what actually gets reflected in biodiversity in the future as all the different organisms come back in to use that land.
Interesting. Pyrodiversity. That's a new term for me. I like that. All right. We've got so many interesting things to talk about with Will Harling today. Thanks everyone for watching live and on the replay. And I want to ask you what this is, because it sounds really interesting, especially to a lot of engaged community members that want to be a part of being the change we need to see in the world. What is the Community Liaison Program for Community Wildfire Response?
Yeah, so the Community Liaison Program was born on the Salmon River after the 2008 wildfire season, when I think we had 8 different incident management teams rotated through that year. We had 4 months of wildfire, and it ended up creating an arc of fire that was about 120 miles long from Sawyer's Bar all the way up to Happy Camp. And and the reality, what we saw that year was that there was so much knowledge that was in the community that there just wasn't a way for the incident management team to intake that knowledge and to use it in actionable ways. And here you have residents that have lived in place for 40, 50, 60 years. They know where the wind blows at what time of day and how hard. They know where the potential control features are. They know that fire line, they tried to hold it in 1987 and it failed, and they tried to hold it again in 1999 and it failed, and that you probably shouldn't try it again. But right over here on my private property is a perfect place, and that worked in 2006. So that kind of local knowledge is so critical to operational fire response. And that's the other piece of that too from 2008 was, the community was just left with such bad taste in their mouth. It felt like there was an invading force that was there for 4 months. And after a while, the joy of having the savior show up and save the day on the white horse and stop your house from burning down gets replaced by, seeing all these things that, could have been better if there was a two-way communication flow. And so luckily, the forest supervisor on the Klamath at the time was supportive of that. And we built this program, which basically identified, these primary level community liaisons that had operational fire experience and could communicate that to the community, and could also communicate that to the team and be a conduit for knowledge. And then that got developed over time to have, tier 2 liaisons that were organizing within their neighborhoods and updating phone trees and updating, fire response, like where those water draw sites might be on private lands, how to get a hold of the landowners to get through any kind of locked gates or anything like that. And so starting in 2009 with the Backbone fire, that program has led to a lot more, mutually beneficial outcomes for both the community and the incident management teams. There's so many examples throughout the years of where, it was, for instance, an armed confrontation with a mandatory evacuation where, the landowners were definitely, in danger of losing their lives, but they weren't going to watch everything go. And so, instead of chest bumping with the local sheriff, you have somebody who knows them to, explain what all the things they're going to do to protect their structures and make sure, everything isn't lost, and under what conditions they'll leave, and to negotiate that. And so, that happened, in the 2014 Whites fire up in Sawyer's Bar. And there ended up being a mutual understanding where there could have been extreme conflict.
Wow.
Another big role we play is, rumor control. Rumors during wildfires spread like their own wildfires.
Yeah.
And, the fires on this side of the river, they're going to burn out from here. My house is in danger. And so, utilizing the social media tools we have today, you can very quickly get to the bottom of that information and get the good information out there more rapidly, and make a huge difference. And also organize that local community response so that people feel ownership in fire on their landscapes. In 2013, when the Butler fire started a couple miles from our place at Butler, the next day we had 40 residents showed up at our place at Butler. We cleared the 3/4 mile long water line. We put in a perimeter fire line around on an old mining ditch. And by the time the team showed up, their jaw literally hit the ground. They're like, what's going on here? We've got our hotshot crew, we've got our engines. We come to save the day. You guys got to get out of here. And we're like, no, we're going to stay. And they're like, well, where's your list? And we're like, well, here's our list of everybody that's here. Where's your list? Show us your list. And so, it ended up being this wonderful collaboration where, they realized, hey, there is a role for communities to play. And if we know how to honor their basic needs as an incident management team for safety of the public and accountability, and proper communication channels, we can coexist and we can benefit each other. I just had a great conversation today with Bosch Parks from Willow Creek community, who's, they just went through the knob fire. There was some friction with the land, with the community response. And there was also some really, bright sides to that community response as well. Mm-hmm. So, I think communities across Humboldt County and beyond are ripe. And in fact, this community liaison program has been exported to Washington and New Mexico in we traded all hands, all lands for a community liaison program. We'll steal your stuff and you take ours. So it's getting out there and it works. And if anybody's interested, get a hold of me.
Yeah, I think there will be many people interested. I was just thinking of Willow Creek and just everywhere where we have homesteads and homesteaders who are committed to staying and doing what they can to protect their land, to understand how to have it in more of a formal liaison program. I mean, is there a formal, okay, you are deputized a liaison now and the agencies and CAL FIRE recognize that? Is that part of the process?
Yeah, and it's important that it's a community-driven program, and I, to CAL FIRE and the Forest Service's credit, when the community through a fire safe council, kind of elects these people, and each year we update our papers and we send them into the Forest Service because we're surrounded by federal land. They acknowledge that. And in these recent teams, they invite you to the cooperators meeting. So you get the latest operational updates. Oftentimes I'm talking directly with operations or the IC, to have those frank conversations that really help have beneficial fire response. But, part of that obligation is that, we also need to acknowledge, that, we need to be talking with our local partners, our local Forest Service district, our local tribes, to make sure we're speaking with a shared voice. Because anytime there's conflict between those voices, these teams will end up, they'll take in the information, and where there's conflict, they'll choose what they think is best, and that takes power away from our local communities. So it's really important through the community liaison program to be touching base with our local partners.
So great to learn about that. Thank you, Will. Moving on to a topic that I've heard a lot about in the last year, a lot of interest with Trees Foundation partner groups when it comes to CCI grants, forest health grants that can really have the size and the scale needed for large scale work in forests and communities. So let's hear more about the CCI grant that was recently awarded to MidKlamath Watershed Council, and Western Klamath Restoration Partnership is a part of that as well. And you said that this is the second grant like this that you've received?
Yeah, our first CAL FIRE Forest Health grant was secured in 2018. And just a huge shout out to the state and to CAL FIRE for recognizing how important this bump in funding was needed to, actually get serious about landscape scale restoration of fire process. And that's, essentially what happened. Our first grant, we focused on the Somesbar Integrated Fire Management Project, which, looking at our local community wildfire protection plan, focused on those most at-risk properties on the mid-slope in an area that hadn't seen fire in over 100 years due to fire exclusion. And so the fuels were continuing to grow up around these mid-slope properties. And we recognized that, we needed to get fire back in there, both for those homes and also because, it was in the heart of these cultural gathering areas for so many families. I mean, right next to the Cut de Mine, the center of the Cuttick world, and all the way up to T-Bar. So we did a ton of work through that first grant, around 1,500 acres of manual fuels reduction, followed up with some mechanical fuels reduction to make strategic fuel breaks. And in fact, in this past McCash wildfire this summer that's still burning, that work was invaluable in ensuring that, those communities were protected even as the fire marched down the hill towards them. Luckily, it was stopped right above the properties on a mid-slope road, but it did spot over those lines into areas that we had treated. So this follow-up grant is really looking at taking that project to the next level and delivering on our promise to restore fire process to that landscape. And so a huge chunk of it, over 3,000 acres, is meant to put prescribed fire and cultural fire on the ground, both on federal and private and tribal lands.
Wow. Yeah, I saw it listed on the CAL FIRE grant website, and it was interesting. Some of the acres said prescribed burn, prep, and then controlled burning. So I guess they were just calling it controlled burning is the term. Prescribed burning, controlled burning, cultural burning.
Yeah, I mean, I know it seems like Greek looking in from the outside, but on the ground it makes sense. I mean, you can achieve cultural fire objectives through a prescribed burn or a controlled burn. But the reality, like what I look at cultural burning is it's lead, it's indigenous lead, and so really, I think that's where we do need to get to a lot, because it's really our tribal partners who've been denied their inherent rights to manage resources with fire across the landscape, but in the litigious world we work in today, it works a lot better to get funding if you say cultural or controlled burning.
Yeah.
Because
control. Let's control everything.
In the box. Don't let it get outside the box.
They're not big on pyrodiversity. That probably wouldn't be a word you use in your grant that much.
Well, there's a great paper, Pyrodiversity begets biodiversity. So check that out.
Very cool.
Read up on it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So this is going to fund a lot more work, continued work, continued controlled and prescribed burning on the landscape for several years now.
Yeah, for another 4 or 5 years. And we have several other funding sources that are complementing that, from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the Forest Service Stevens Act funding. I just want to say to folks out there that are interested in writing these CAL FIRE grants, think about the capacity in your community and make sure that you build in that funding to build your capacity. And another shout out to CAL FIRE, when we came to them and said, hey, if we're going to be effective with this, we need to hire those leadership positions that are going to make sure this work happens as intended on the ground. And so they were okay with us, taking a fraction, roughly 1/5 of the grant to build our capacity to the point of where we've been able to be successful and attract those folks that could really elevate the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And so have you seen a workforce of people working on these projects kind of grow over time? Because that's something I hear about a lot in where I live in Southern Humboldt, is we don't have enough people to carry out the manual mechanical thinning and that kind of work. And so where's the workforce? You could have and so has that been something that you've seen evolve in your area in Klamath?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is it's really hard work. And there's a reason why people don't feel like doing it for $14 an hour. So one of the things is to revisit our base pay for these jobs. When you start to pay people a living wage, you start to see people come want that work. And I think we're going to see a change with the shifts in the green economy in our area, when people are looking for other things to do and maybe have equipment or know how to run a saw. And the fact is, we need an army of people out there doing this work, and they deserve a living wage. And so, that's really what we're advocating for. I will say too, we play a role in developing that local workforce. And just an example of that is it takes more work on our end, but we break up the contracts into smaller contracts that we know will be competitive for our local businesses. And since we started in 2018, we've had 2 tribally run fuels reduction private businesses spring up in our area. And we work very closely with them to, help them succeed. And that's really important for the long run in our community. They're building that local workforce, and they're taking folks that, really need work and have the skills and putting them to good use. And, at the same time, we're looking at the larger scale and, having several 100-acre contracts with some of your more regional, contractors from out of the area that can hammer out a lot of acres in a short amount of time. And I don't mean to discourage that at all. They've done great work for us too, with a little bit of oversight.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And you also mentioned that there is a grant. Was that also to MidKlamath Watershed Council, the grant from the Humboldt Area Foundation and Wild Rivers Community that pays for gas cards for community volunteers? Tell us about that.
Yeah, this happened in the last week. Humboldt Area Foundation and Wild Rivers reached out and said, "Hey, we see all the good work you guys are doing out there. What do you need?" And we threw out a couple ideas, and the next week they were cutting a check. So just a huge shout out to our local foundations for recognizing that call to action and putting that resource where it's needed. We've had over 40, probably closer to 60 community volunteers that are using all their own resources and time. Some people have spent several weeks, including myself, helping defend private properties or prepare private properties to receive wildfire. So those folks are heroes right alongside our firefighters, and deserve to be recognized.
Yeah, taking their time, energy, and resources to work on fire in their community. So is that specifically for work on prescribed burns?
No, this is for wildfire response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Those gas cards. And one of the other projects I was really thankful that they funded was a water system that could be used for wildfire defense, as well as prescribed fire implementation at the home of a Karuk elder who lives across a rickety old wooden bridge that you can't even drive a Toyota pickup over. So no fire suppression response resources could make it to their home. So the Karuk tribe, Mikwik, and HAF and Wild Rivers all went in together to fund that. So that's going to be implemented here shortly as well.
Awesome. That's really great. All right. So you mentioned this earlier when we were talking about some of the legislation on the governor's desk about burn suspension. So I don't know if you want to highlight that again, that we need a shift in who decides when to suspend burning due to weather conditions, right?
Yeah, inherently fire is a local practice. And to have someone from Washington, D.C. cut off all prescribed fire across the country, even when we have planning level 5, which is when all the resources are committed to wildfires, is just crazy. The reality is that we've had several fire starts from various causes, and you have all the fire resources right there on the wildfire, and they come over and they put out the other start. And so, this whole resource drawdown concept is kind of, smoke and mirrors. It's not reflecting the truth we see on the ground. And the reality is that, it's looking very possible that we aren't able to do any of our much needed burning on public lands, because of, the requirement that we have to be to a planning level 3 before, they're able to burn, and even get permission. And now even our local people have to go to the state or the region or nationally to get those permissions to put prescribed fire on the ground. the way it should be is those forest level Forest Service folks should be talking with their local tribal fire leaders and agreeing about whether or not it's time to put fire on the ground. So there's a lot of change that needs to happen there.
Great. Well, thank you for advocating for that. And it's really good to think about and learn about and learn how everyday people like myself can help shift the fire paradigm. So let me know, Will, what can I do to help? What can listeners do and viewers do to shift the fire paradigm?
Well, fire inherently is a practice of place, and being a people of place is essential to understand fire on our landscapes. And I think the reality is, 200 years ago, every tribal 5 or 6 year old had more understanding of fire on the landscape than about 98% of our population today. It was something they were taught from a very young age. And today we've lost that knowledge, and we need to get it back. All of us, we need to understand fire on our landscape. And that means, what was that fire regime? How did Native people manage fire on your landscape? What did the forest look like 200 years ago? All those trees that I was hugging in my 20s were trees that were essentially weeds in a well-tended garden. And I didn't know that until my 30s and 40s, talking with folks like Bill Tripp and others. So I think there's a huge learning curve that we can do to understand fire on our landscapes. And then, at the same time, we need to get involved. And part of that learning process is getting involved in the mini groups that are available to us. Prescribed burn associations are springing up everywhere. Our fire safe councils have been around for a couple decades. The Prescribed Fire Council, volunteer fire departments are engaged. A huge shout out to Kai Ostro and all he's done in Southern Humboldt. We're having a bunch of those folks come up to our Trex event. Even your homeowners association, and educating in your community, it's going to take a grassroots effort to build this fire knowledge, to really, protect our communities and protect our ecosystems from the negative impacts of fire. Other things, participate in a training exchange or all hands, all lands event or a PBA burn. These are incredible opportunities to get a drip torch in your hand and start to get that experience and knowledge of fire firsthand. Reach out to the tribes in your area and understand how you can support them, both financially and with resources and politically, because they are the leaders in fire in California, and their voices need to be elevated. And then finally, I think, Craig Tucker, Bill Tripp, Margot Robbins, and many others, Lenya, Don Hankins, created this Good Fire paper, policy paper that was commissioned by the Karuk tribe. It's on the tribe's climate change project's website. If you Google Karuk Good Fire, it'll pop up. Check it out. There's an incredible list of actionable items in that report that just basically lines out point by point what we can do in the state of California to forward good fire. Great. both political changes as well as, cultural changes.
That's fantastic. I will post that link in the comments on our Facebook page and on our YouTube page. And I will also paste a link that you're going to send me about the Trex training and some opportunities people might have to still participate in some capacity as a guest on those trainings, right?
Yes, the visitor form. I'll send it to you as soon as we get off the call.
Fantastic. Oh, this is great. Thank you so much, Will. It's great to talk with you, and it's going to be really fun on Sunday, October 3rd from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. to have you and Kai and Lenya and a number of other people speaking all together, and let's all talk about these issues from many different perspectives. But it's definitely great to be informed and inspired by you today, Will, and really we're thrilled to award you with our Fire Resilience Tree of Life Award. It's going to be beautiful. Can't wait to give it to you.
Thank you. Well, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants for sure here. So I accept that on behalf of many other people that have been in this struggle for decades. But thank you so much, and for all the work that Trees Foundation has done to carry on this important dialogue. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's been a real treat. Thanks for coming on Tree
All right.
Lounge Live. Let's do this again sometime.
Sounds
All
good.
right. Peace out, everybody. Take care. Be well. Bye.